Hello people, this is Evan with Fix the Things, and today I'm going to show you how to go from these nasty frets to this. Coming up. Here are the tools you're going to need to be able to do this job. First and most importantly, you're going to need some masking tape. This is just normal masking tape. You can get the blue painter stuff, that's fine too. You want to get some steel wool. Now, this is as fine a steel wool as I can find. I think it's quadruple aught, triple aught. It just means, you know, sandpaper has numbers, steel wool has like weird things. So it's like 000 or something like that. You're gonna need sandpaper as well. For frets, I don't like to go lower than 800, but these are particularly nasty. So I might have to jump down to 600. So what I've got is 600, 1,000, 1,500, and 2,500. If your guitar is not that bad, you can use 800 or 1,000, and then you want something really fine like a 2,000 or something like that. So if you don't have these exact grits, that's fine. This helps, just some kind of sanding block. I'll show you that later. This is just a piece of 2x4 I cut in half. And to clean this guitar, I'm going to be using some alcohol prep pads. Now, I don't know if I would recommend doing that on all guitars, but this one, like I said, it's kind of crusty. So I'm going to be using that, and if your guitar is not that bad, just use some like cleaner or something like that. Just wipe it down. I've got a rag and some magnets that I'll show you what those are about in just a second. But most importantly, tape, sandpaper, steel wool, we're good to go. I'm going to start off by cleaning the fretboard. You can tell there's just gunk and stuff on the actual fretboard, not the frets. So to clean that off, I'm going to use this alcohol prep pad. Use something a little more mild if you're concerned about the finish of your guitar. Let's see if this can get off some of that gunk. So I think this will work really nice. You can see we've got a bunch of nastiness on here. Just using my fingernail, work it a little bit. And I'm going to do the whole neck, and I'll show you what that looks like. Yeah, gross, in a second. So I just got finished using the alcohol pads to clean the fretboard. So the frets are still gross looking, but the fingerboard, that's a little ding in there. But you can see how that's, you know, cleaner. Now the next step is going to change depending on if your guitar is maple like this or rosewood or ebony, something like that. On maple, you want to mask off the fingerboard. That's what the masking tape is for. So we're going to put tape down here so that we're just exposing the metal. If you have a rosewood fingerboard, a lot of times I don't even worry about taping it off because it's easier to clean up and oil and get it looking nice. You can still mask off rosewood, and that'll definitely keep your fingerboard nicer. If you've got like a nice shiny rosewood or ebony and you want to keep it that way, mask it off, but it's not exactly necessary. So what we're going to do here, you want to grab your masking tape, and if I can find the end, there it is. So grab a little piece, and we're going to use it to mask off the fingerboard. Now, another tip is if you have an old guitar that the finish is kind of flaky or you're worried about pulling something up, what you want to do is grab your piece and then stick it onto like your jeans or your pants or shirt or whatever, like several times, like da 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 da, and pick up a bunch of lint. And what that will do is reduce how sticky the masking tape is. So you just put it on your jeans a couple times. You can see how it picks up some crud, and then when you put it on, it doesn't stick as much, so that'll help you be able to pull it off easier. Now I'm going to continue on taping off the fingerboard until I get to where the masking tape is too wide, so I'll go ahead and do that. So what do you do when you get to this point? You can see how my masking tape is now wider than the distance between the frets. So to save some time, what I do is I just pull this back a little bit, find the edge of the fret, put it down there, and then you have this little bump right here. Just push that down. So that saves you time other than slicing the masking tape. So I'll go ahead and do that for a little while. So now that you've gone a good ways up the fretboard and things are starting to get really thin, what I do is grab your masking tape, tear off a really big long piece, stick it on something. Can you see that? Stick it on something, tear off the other end, and grab a knife or a blade. I've got razor blade, and I'm just going to go down the middle. So after you slice it down the middle, what I do is grab the end of it, use your blade, and cut it into sections that are longer than the width of your fingerboard. So if you keep doing that, then you have a bunch of these little pieces that you can use for the thin parts of your frets. Now that we have those thinner strips cut, just grab them and do the same thing. There's one and two. Here's another tip for you. If your guitar has places like this where the finish has come off and it's just bare wood, definitely use the tape on your jeans or clothing trick to reduce the stickiness. I don't think this one will be a problem, but if the finish is come off, that point is where you're gonna pull the tape off and you'll pull finish with it. So be sure to stick that on your pant legs or whatever and reduce the stickiness so you don't pull stuff off. Also, you can see how even though we cut it into half strips, it's still wider than the fret. That's fine. So what I do is I stick it down like this, use my fingernail to get it into the edge, and then I'm going to use my razor blade to trim that off. So this is how I use the razor blade to deal with things like this. So you want to be careful. If this weirds you out, just, you know, cut your masking tape thinner or whatever. This, once you do it, is quicker, but I've had experience doing it. So I'm just going to use the razor blade and cut right up to where the fret is. Going all the way through to the end. So I don't want to just stop at the end of the fret right there. I want to keep going past and cut all the way through. So now that I've used the razor blade to cut that, you can grab the piece that you don't want and pull it off like that. Now you're left with a nice clean line there. So now that your fingerboard is all taped off, I've gone through and double checked and made sure all my lines are straight, everything's taped off. You could just start the next process, but I'll show you another tip here that'll save you a bunch of time later. If you just put these over and stick them to the back of the neck, then you got to peel off each individual one. So to save yourself a whole bunch of headache, grab your tape again, pull off a long strip about this long, and tape it underneath the end. Nice little camera bump there. So we're going to use this, put it up against the edge of the fretboard. Doesn't have to be super clean. So I put one piece of tape underneath, and I'm going to do the same thing up top because this is still sticky. So I really only usually do it on one end, that way you can just grab this and pull it all off in one piece. And I'll just fold these over. But like I said, if your guitar has finish that's chipping off, you want to do that on the other side too to keep this from hitting the finish. But I'm not really worried about that with this guitar. I'll be extra careful, so I'll move those out of the way. And now you have a nice taped off fingerboard. I also want to tape off these parts of the guitar because what we're going to be doing is getting sandpaper up in here. And I don't want to hit the finish of the guitar or the pickup or anything like that. So you can just use tape to tape it off. If you've got some paper you want to use, that's cool too. What I do is I save these pieces of paper that strings come in just for this reason. Put a piece right here, put one right there, put one right there, and that just makes sure that I'm not going to hit the finish of the guitar. So I know it seems pretty tedious to go through all this, but I promise you it's worth it to have everything taped off nice and clean. So the next thing we're going to do is going to grab our sandpaper and our most aggressive grit that we're going to use. In my case, I've got some 600 grit. And you just need a little piece like this. And what I do is I wrap it around my finger like that and use my finger to do this. If I used to do a lot of this, and so it can kind of wear on your finger a little bit, and you can use like a little dowel or wrap it around, something like that. But your finger's fine, and we're going to sand it, but not really stay in one area. If you stay in one area, especially with like a 600, 400 or something, you can actually change the height of your frets by just sanding there. So you want to don't stay in one place, but move all the way around the neck, and we'll see what that looks like. So here's what those frets look like just after a couple seconds of using the 600 grit. You can see we've got wear spots for each string. And this is all just what I just did on camera. So that's where I stopped. So continue doing that. I'm going to do the whole fingerboard down here with the 600, and we'll take a look at that. This is what the frets look like after doing the whole fingerboard. And it's just a few seconds. You don't want to stay in one place for very long. Now it's not perfect looking, obviously. There's still corrosion in our wear marks and probably on the side of the frets. Yeah, like that one. It's hard to see on camera, but you can tell my finger is too fat to get into the side of the fret. I'm not going to worry about that right now. So now let's move on to our other grits. All right, exact same thing. I'm going to use 1000 grit sandpaper now. $1,500. $2,500. All right, so now that we're done with the sandpaper, you're going to grab your steel wool, the finest grit you can find, and steel wool is kind of nasty stuff. You're going to get little flakes places, and you can get splinters, and they really suck, trust me. So I'm going to just grab a glove, put it on. That's going to keep my fingers protected. And you want to do this in a place, we're going to clean it up later, but you'll get little metal flakes places. So if that bothers you, put like a towel down underneath the guitar. But we're going to do the same thing now with steel wool. So now that you're done with the steel wool, you're going to have little flakes of things around your area, little bits of steel, and that's no good. You don't want to breathe it in, that kind of stuff. So you can vacuum it, that'll work just fine. If you've got a magnet, I've got some magnets in here. Since the steel is obviously magnetic, we're going to use the magnet just to pick up all that other stuff. So I run it over your workspace, and that will pick up the stray bits of steel. Now, it's worth pointing out, your guitar pickups are magnetic, right? And what you really don't want to do is get this magnet super close to them. In rare occasions, it will cause it can demagnetize your magnet in your pickup. It's not super common, but just be mindful of that. So kind of stay away from the pickups and use either just wipe it off with your hands, grab it with your fingers, or something like that. Now, this is what it looks like after you've used the steel wool and cleaned it up. You can still see on the side of that fret, there's still some corrosion, but the tops of the frets are clean. And if that doesn't bother you, it's just the tops that really matter for playability or for feel. So if the sides don't bother you, continue on to the next step, but I kind of want to clean these up just a little bit more. And for that, I'm going to use this tiny fret end file that I got from StewMac. That's Stuart McDonald website. They sell a lot of guitar specific stuff. Check them out if you want. But I'm just going to use this. It's got a non-rough side on one side. So I can use that to come in and just hit the side of the fret to knock off that corrosion. You do not want to hit the tops of the frets, because then your frets will be out of level. But I'm just gonna take a little bit extra time, clean up the sides of these for my good friend. Okay, I just got done using that file to clean up the edges, and while not exactly perfect, that's a whole lot better. And I used some steel wool again to clean them up. And in all fairness, you probably should, if you're going to do the edges, maybe do those first and then go through the sandpaper grits. But that's kind of what it looks like now. A whole lot better. Now let's move on. So we used the sandpaper to go this direction with the frets and our steel wool this direction. And you can play it now, but if you were to bend a string across the fret like this, you would feel a little bit of grit as you did that because we were using the sandpaper to go this direction. So to fix that and have these feel super smooth when you're bending, we're going to take our really fine grit sandpaper. So in this case I've got 25, 2000 works pretty good. And our sanding block, if you got a real sanding block, that'll work great. But so now what we want to do is use this and go with the fret this direction. That's why I've got the block, is to keep it all flat. So it takes a couple seconds. You just kind of go back and forth a little bit. Again, don't stay in one place too long. And this is just to get rid of any side-to-side sanding marks. And that will feel a lot better. For the final bit of polishing for the frets, I'm going to use some metal polish to really just give it that extra shine. I've got Brasso, really any metal polish should work. I've got an old t-shirt here wrapped around that same block that I used for the sandpaper. So I'm just going to use just a little bit. Work it in. A little bit should go a long way. And you don't need the block for this, but it saves your fingers a little bit. So what I do is just use the block and go back and forth on the frets. Give it that shine. Here comes the moment of truth, where we hope that our tape job worked out all right. And this is exactly why I put tape here, so we can just rip the whole thing off. Not rip it, peel it very gently. Is that a better word? So go slow. The last thing you want is to pull up something important. So there may be a couple of spots when you're done that have some residue left behind, but most of the time that just wipes straight off. That's just some dust and stuff that got in there. Got a straggler here, pull that off, but take a look at these frets now. Nice and shiny. They're gonna feel great to bend on. Strings are gonna glide over them real nicely. And I was hoping that these wear marks would come out with the steel wool and then the polish, but they're still there. I'm not worried about it. After a couple minutes of playing, those should go away. The dark spots, I mean, not the actual wear. The wear's in the fret, so that kind of is what it is. But yeah, that is the process. Now if your guitar was rosewood or ebony or something like that, you don't have to tape it off to do this. You can just use the sandpaper straight over it. What you want to make sure and do is, after you've done all the polishing and stuff, you want to take some kind of cleaner and hit the fingerboard. I used alcohol before, but what I highly recommend is Bestine or Naphtha. You should be able to find those at like a Home Depot or something like that. And Bestine and Naphtha, they're very guitar-friendly cleaners. You can use that to clean off the fingerboard and gunk and stuff like that. So get some of that if you would like. And then for rosewood, you want to go and use a conditioner, like a lemon oil or some kind of oil to put on the fingerboard to bring out that darkness. Because after you use the steel wool and Bestine or Naphtha or something like that, it's going to look a little faded, and you need some oil to really bring out the dark color of that rosewood or ebony or something like that. But other than that, the process is the same, and you can also still tape off those boards and it'll be exactly the same. And that's how you get your nasty frets looking all polished and fresh and clean and feeling great. It's not that hard, just takes a few minutes, a little tedious some parts, but well worth it in the end. And now you're ready to string up your guitar, rock out, and make some music. See ya.